So, welcome to another edition of the North State Symphony's virtual Just Ask. For those of you who aren't familiar, this is a series we started a few years ago during our Masterworks concerts where audience members actually submit questions during our intermission and we answer at the beginning of the second half. And now that we're in unusual circumstances, we are now transferring this to an online platform where we also incorporate a discussion. And if those watching us want to submit any questions along the way, feel free. And I'm sure we would be happy to engage you and give any knowledge that we are able to. So today I have with me two conductors who I've known for quite a while now. First, I have Dina Gilbert, who is the music director of the Kamloops Symphony in British Columbia and of the Orchestre Symphonique de l'Estuaire in Québec, and also, which I pronounced right, I think. Also with me is Dane Lam, who is the principal conductor of China's Xi'an Symphony Orchestra and also does a lot of work with London's Opera Holland Park. And it's such a pleasure to have you both with me, and I anticipate a nice discussion about where our orchestras were at pre-pandemic, what we're doing now, and how we see our vision for the future. So just before we get into that, we'll get into some background because I said we all sort of, I knew both of you, let me see, at least more than a decade now, so that's good. Dina and I went to school together at the Université de Montréal, where I was doing a doctorate at that point, and she was working on her master's. And you know, she's done great things, and has now, you know, at least two orchestras. Do you have another group? You said, Dina, in Canada?
Oh, I mean, I used to be as well founder of the Ensemble Archéa, a chamber orchestra in Montreal, but now I'm principal conductor of the Orchestre des Grands Ballets Canadiens in Montreal. So conductor as well in Montreal.
And of course, you also do a lot of guest conducting, and I have worked with Montreal Symphony on. In addition to your past position, you also frequently guest conduct them and whatnot. And Dane, we met we were talking about this, I believe in 2009, when we were both auditioning for a conducting fellowship at the Royal Northern College of Music, which you won.
Yeah,
it was interesting. You know, always interesting taking these auditions, being in a room full of conductors. And Dane, I remember Dane because he was the only one out of this 7 or 8 conductors in this tiny little room, just sitting back, relaxing, reading this magazine, just no cares in the world. And then, of course, he goes on to win the whole thing.
Well, it's always more nerve-wracking when you're looking at the scores before you, and you know. Now I love talking to other conductors, but back then when you're starting out, you know, they're a competitive bunch, conductors are. So I have to try and isolate myself from all that and just read something.
Oh, I completely understand. And I tried hard to implement that mindset in future auditions, not always successfully. So I give you kudos for that. Anyone that can isolate themselves from this sort of competitive atmosphere. You know, I mean, ironically, the people that you meet in situations like that come, you know, full circle, and we all, you know, of course, now support each other and even give each other gigs now and then. And it's a great thing, a great sort of bond relationship to have with each other. So let's start off. You know, how are you both? You know, how have you been holding up in this whole crazy 2-month plus situation now?
You want to start, Dane?
Yes. I'm just fine. I mean, at the beginning, it was really worrying for all kinds of reasons because, as I'm sure a lot of people know, you know, we performing artists, a lot of us are freelancers, and if our concerts are cancelled, then we don't get paid because of a clause in contracts all over the world, force majeure. And it means, you know, we don't get anything. And so there was the whole living thing, but luckily the government's come through and there's all kinds of different ways to generate income. And then there's the whole artistic thing, you know, because the cancellations still are sort of rolling ever onwards. And it was very hard to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to study, turn of the screw or cunning little vixen or whatever. And you don't know if it's going to happen or not. And I know a lot of people say, oh, this is the best time. You've got all this time just to learn. And it's true, but to be honest, I haven't really been in the mindset to sit down and Benjamin Britten or whatever. I would love to, and I've tried, but that's how it is.
Right. Yeah, I've found that I've had very little time to actually sit down and study anything because there's so much logistical stuff to maneuver in transitioning a physical entity into an online environment. What about you, Dina? How have things been with you?
Actually, felt the same way about like being able to really study score when you are not really sure that this is going to happen. So at first, of course, it was the feeling of grief because it was my busiest guest conducting and also engagements. I had like full weeks of concert with TSO, concerts with Orchestre Symphonique de Montréal that are now postponed, concerts in France, debuts in France and stuff. I was supposed to be with Joshua Bell doing the Red Violin in South Korea in June. So I was just like, my God, what is happening? Everything is just canceling after the other one. But at one point, I was telling my agent, please, how come they haven't canceled now? Because I was just way more in the mindset of actually, okay, now I want to actually work more as music director, looking at different scenarios, because are we launching our season? Are we stopping? Are we making the breaks? How should we look at this? So my focus was more about finding solution or actually analyzing the situation than actually being calm and resting and taking all my time to study score for upcoming performances. That would be the case. So I totally agree with you. My mindset went on something else. Yeah.
Exactly. And we were all taking time away from actually physically conducting and making music. But the organizations that we currently work with and serve. So Dina, your position in Kamloops, it's a city of about 100,000, correct?
Yeah.
And then the other orchestra, which you said was east of Quebec, is approximately how big? S2F?
Orchestre Symphonique de Québec, it's Orchestre Symphonique de l'Xi'an, sorry. The city where most of our concerts are presented is about 40,000.
Mm-hmm.
So since we're serving all territory that is east of Quebec City, it's super large. So in the same way, I'm kind of finding the ways right now that actually we might be able to reach out to more people at the same time if we go with some numeric digital things on content online. We'll see. So yeah, the things are different regarding those two communities, and the challenges are different. Though in both of these orchestras, there's a lot of musicians who are coming from Montreal City, Quebec City, and or Vancouver in BC. So you need to also think about accommodation, then single room, if there's all these kind of health restrictions, and then also for getting there. So some territories at one point, and even cities kind of like blocked because they were not. They wanted to make sure that there was no more spread of the virus. So it's all these things that we need to think ahead to adjust the budget accordingly, obviously, and to make it happen.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that. And I think you and I are similar. So with the North State Symphony, for example, we serve two cities. Chico and Reading are both around 100,000. And on the opposite spectrum, and I love that we have all of this variety and we get to have this discussion. Dane, your position in China is in a city of 10, 12 million. How big is the city?
Well, it's anywhere between 8 and 10 million, depending on how you measure it. It's just a medium-sized Chinese city, not too big.
Medium size.
And I think it's safe to say that in the places Dina and I hold music directorships, we don't have much other professional competition. So I think our orchestras are it as far as you want to see a symphony orchestra concert, you come to Kamloops or North State. Dane, you in such a large place, so it's your orchestra, and how many other ensembles are you sort of competing for patrons for?
There's another symphony orchestra that has been around for longer than our orchestra, but the Xi'an Symphony has grown really rapidly and attracted some great soloists. So there's that symphony orchestra. There's this conservatory who have a fantastic hall. I think ours is better, but they have a pretty good hall. And the conservatory is huge there, 6,000 students. So they've got their own orchestra that also do good things. And there's a Chinese instrument orchestra as well that perform music. So we do have the competition. And the other thing is, of course, it is a massive city, but Western art music, Western classical music, symphonic music is relatively new to the city. And so we have to create and engage audiences in all kinds of different ways to get them into the concert hall. And it's, you know, I've been there since 2014 and it hasn't played out exactly as I've expected it. And audiences don't respond to the same things that I would expect audiences to respond to, you know, repertoire and whatever. So it's been a very interesting journey in that sense. Interesting.
Okay, so those are sort of the parameters that we're dealing with, and pre-COVID, pre-worldly pandemic, we for example here at the North State, we offer, you know, for instance, 4 masterwork sets. We have a pop series, a holiday concert, chamber music, all that stuff, and did very little as far as online engagement and reaching people that way. And all of that is changing rapidly, and we're at a time, you know, in the past 2 months where I think all of us are just in this whirlwind, this tornado of how do we keep people engaged while not being able to do the fundamental thing that we do, which is, you know, bring people together in a concert hall in one space for X amount of time, reliving these great masterworks, or these, you know, introducing to new works, or, you know, creating works of art that exist within a finite amount of time. And now, you know, it's sort of this look for a lot of our patrons who are able to access this online realm. It's a look behind the curtain in a lot of ways of what we do as ensembles, as conductors, as performing artists. And it has a lot of opportunity and a lot of challenge that I think we're all navigating through together. I know we're doing things like watch parties where we revisit, you know, archive performances that the symphony did in the past 5 or 6 years. We're doing things like this, these discussions where are great opportunities for all of us to see what is happening around the world and to share these ideas publicly, and to let people know that it's not just in our singular communities, that this actually is, you know, and it should be reinforced as such, you know, a worldly venture together. So, and Dina, for example, I've seen you, you know, of course, do these sessions as well. I've seen you give online conducting sort of masterclasses. Who was that geared towards?
Sorry, who was?
When you were doing the online conducting sort of lesson, who were you?
It was our debut online on a live book event, because we've never done that before. But with the small team at KSO, the Daniel Mills, the executive director, then also Ryan Notes at the marketing, we've been a live stream like this that I had like said that idea. Oh, I could do conducting classes really quickly online, but then after you think, but though it won't work, of course, there's no musician, then forget about the audio, forget about this. So effectively, it was more conducting workshop and chat where people were taking any kind of wooden spool they had in their kitchen. And so a bit about what is the conducting, what is actually my job, because most of people, you know, coming at a concert, they think, oh, that's that person waving their arms from beginning to the end, but what is that person about? So I had the opportunity to answer a lot of questions we had previously received by email. Then just sharing the few basics, techniques about how to pretend to be a conductor, because to me, air conducting or on a CD wouldn't even make sense anyways. But I think that with those general guidelines, they had a better understanding of why do we use the baton,
right.
What are the clear gesture, how come people are the musicians are understanding our understanding the gesture, why do we need a conductor at one point with a certain amount of musicians. So these were actually really nice because we received a lot of questions live and I could answer them. And I was even surprised that there was people in Quebec, but also in Europe actually, that reach out and ask questions. So that's when you realize, oh my God, so when you go live and on the web, the borders or the boundaries of our territory is not there. So yeah, but
exactly.
Yeah.
So it was a live session. Would you say that the majority of things that you both are doing are live or pre-recorded and then just stuck out there?
No, not pre-recorded, because in opposition with, in difference with what both of you are probably having, we don't have actually video archives from our concerts.
Yeah.
Now you're thinking, oh my God, I could have done that, but too late. So that's why for us, it's more about building new things right away. And this first conducting workshop chat was the first one, but now we're aiming to provide this kind of activity each 3 weeks or so. Next time will be me and having as a guest for this time the KSO chorus master Tomas Bioch, and then also having a little activity where you can maybe reach out to the choristers so they have something nice to do halfway through the activity. So this is the way we are thinking about connecting with our audience. Later on, having guest soloists and also our principal musicians as well.
Right.
To express different kinds of subjects. Yeah.
When were your conducting lessons, Dina? Were they recently? When was this online conducting chat?
I mean, you can see it after if you want. It's still on our page or something.
Was it recent? Because
yeah,
I just have
that was 1 week ago.
1 week ago, exact. There's a very funny story then, because I was just doing this virtual open day for Opera Holland Park,
okay,
in London, and we had conducting lessons similar to that, group conducting lessons. There were singing lessons, design lessons, drawing lessons. There was a virtual choir, a virtual chorus. Anyway, a couple of people didn't turn up to the online conducting lesson because they thought they read the time as Canadian time, so maybe they turned up to yours instead.
Oh. Okay.
So in addition to the online conducting, and you said you're not able to do watch parties because you haven't archived. We've been lucky in that respect because we have an association with a university that occasionally they have filming sort of media classes that come in and actually record our concerts. So that's been an enormous advantage for us.
Totally.
But that hasn't been every concert. We've had maybe 1 or 2 a season, and we've actually also done some watch parties where it's just my conductor cam and some archived Zoom audio that I've had, and it's not perfect, but it's nice to relive at least in that format.
Mm-hmm.
Dane, have you done or are you planning to do any sort of watch party type things, or do you have archived concerts?
There are some archive concerts of varying levels of recording quality, because previously we have live stream concerts before all this COVID on CCTV, which is the Chinese national broadcaster. So we were reaching millions and millions of people like that. So there is a bit of footage, and we do record our own concerts, but China is at a point now where musicians can actually get together in the same space. And Xi'an is most famous for being the home of the Terracotta Warriors. Mm-hmm. And so our orchestra has quite a good relationship with government, and we have done live concerts at the Terracotta Warriors before, but the orchestra is performing chamber music at the moment, mostly in masks, and we have live stream concerts from the Terracotta Warriors, from the ancient city walls, and so that's a real way of engaging with audiences at the moment. So
they are getting together, performing for a virtual audience right now.
They're performing for a virtual audience, but the musicians are together.
Mm-hmm. And how is there a cap on the number of musicians currently?
I think there's a cap of about 15 musicians in any one place at the moment, but we haven't expanded to that level yet. Partially because it's hard to get conductors into the country at the moment because China has a ban on any non-Chinese people entering the country at the moment. So it's been chamber music, it's been string quartets, it's been percussion ensembles, it's been some traditional instruments, just as a way of connecting with audiences. We have a few jokers in the audience as well, a very good clarinet quartet actually, and they sort of model themselves after two-set violin. And so, yeah, they record videos for the Chinese streaming service Bilibili, and it's just a nice way to get people switched on.
And Dane, when did these chamber performances start?
They started very early March, early May rather. So they've been going for a while.
Oh.
I mean, apart from the concert halls and theaters and movie theaters and all those kind of things, China has been open for about almost, well, I'd say about 6 weeks now. You know, my friends there, I see they're walking around. Life is normal. They can go to restaurants, but there are still restrictions on the number of people who can gather indoors in, say, a theater. And of course, that has implications, because if we can only sell, 30% of seats, then it makes concerts uneconomical, which is a difficult thing.
And a few more questions, Dane. I think it worked out well for you that the bulk of the craziness was before your season even started, right?
Well, yeah, although it did absolutely put the kibosh on the start of our season, and we were very excited about it because we had Marta Argerich and friends, concert mini festival, opening the season for us. It would have been fantastic. Thankfully, we've rescheduled it. But I mean, I was saying to you earlier when news started to filter in about this coronavirus, it seemed like it was just in Wuhan initially, and then I got the word from the orchestra that we might have to cancel the opening concert of the season.
Wow.
Oh no, but at least there's the rest of the season, and at least I can still do my other work in other countries, and then it just snowballed, and the house of cards just toppled in March.
Is your orchestra supported by governmental sources?
Yeah. There's 3 levels of governmental support. There's the municipal, and then there's the provincial government, and then the central government, and they all support us in different ways. And it's changed. The sort of makeup of the support has changed since I first started there in 2014, when we were almost entirely self-funded. I mean, we had to generate our own funding. There was a bit of private sponsorship in the community from people who were really interested in classical music, but we had to generate a lot of our own income, and that was reflected in the programming. There were a lot of pops concerts, and there were a lot of movie concerts. I mean, I did so many different kinds of concerts when I did like Joe Hisaishi concerts, the Studio Ghibli, the Japanese animated concerts, and movie concerts, and Chinese traditional concerts, and then maybe one sort of subscription concert every month or every 6 weeks or something. And we sourced our soloists from the local conservatory, and now it's almost the opposite. We have a lot of subscription concerts, some really big international soloist opera, and as a consequence of that, and also driving that was increased government support.
And so at this point in your tenure, what percentage of your operating budget is governmental support?
It varies year to year and project to project. It's hard to put an exact figure on it because it changes all the time.
Okay.
But we're still at a point where we want to generate positive revenue from our concerts. So we don't just, because especially in Europe, especially on the continent, some orchestras can write off a big name soloist, just the prestige of having the big name soloist, and they'll take the hit for for the loss. Or if Jonas Kaufmann comes and sings at the Royal Opera House or something, there might be a sponsor that underwrites his fee. We still need to make a profit from tickets.
Right. I can probably speak for Dina and myself. I think we're a little jealous of. So, in terms of Dane, in terms of how your season has morphed since it begins in March, do you anticipate until the end of the season mostly these chamber type performances, or do you think you can get back to some semblance of an orchestral performance?
It really, as we're all learning, it depends on government directive. It depends on how many people we can have safely and permissibly inside the concert hall. So it goes back to what I was saying before. There needs to be enough people in to be able to break even on a concert. And the other complicated factor in China, as in other places like Australia, where I'm from, is that there are border restrictions. And so at the moment, I can't even go to China. No foreigners can go to China except in exceptional circumstances. So we don't know when those restrictions will be lifted. I've heard whispers about October, but we just don't know.
Wow.
So you can't even get there right now, even with a quarantine period, nothing at all?
Wow.
No, there was, when it was looking like my April 25th concert might have been able to happen, at that point, I could have quarantined for 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. But the other added complication in China is that the quarantine is also, at least it was, between provinces. And so there were no international flights to Xi'an, at least none from any airport I could get to from here in London. So I would have had to fly to Beijing or Shanghai, quarantine for 2 weeks there, and fly to Xi'an and quarantine for, It was a real nightmare, and it's something that we have to consider a lot more. We will have to consider a lot more now. I used to just take it for granted. It was a little game sometimes to see how I could wedge in concerts and okay, if I finish this concert in Xi'an on Sunday night, this plane to Shenzhen, and then I connect with a flight in Brisbane, and I can go and do a rehearsal that day. And it was unsustainable anyway. So maybe this is a decent wake-up call.
True.
And Dina, I think our season sort of disintegrated at the same point, probably early March, something like that. How would you describe the sort of what the actions in your communities at this point? What's going on? How do people feel when you bring back some semblance of live music? Which for us, we're trying to bring it back in September, but what's going on with your orchestras?
So what's the plan now? So my last concert was in Kamloops. We finished with Eroica, and I was like, wow, this was probably the best piece I could cherish. I felt actually lucky to finish with this one. And our title of concert was Heroes and Heroines. And then just thinking about, this is pretty much what we're experiencing right now, looking everybody around. So we were about to launch both the orchestra were about to launch our seasons. But when we saw all the things going on, canceling the 2 last concerts in both orchestra or postponing them, we kind of put the brakes a bit, waited a bit to see, okay, should we still launch our season or not? But then since the situation was getting worse and worse, we thought maybe it's not a good idea. And actually, I felt that this really nice programming that was planned was not to be as successful, meaningful with this situation if we needed to adjust really quickly with the same pieces. Or just as an example, for example, having 2 concerts a year with the choir, then is this really possible? So all these things, maybe Beethoven 9 needs to wait, kind of thing. So instead of just being unsatisfied, launching whatever the season, and then needed to unknitting everything and knitting back kind of thing, I decided to ask the board about, what, I'd be eager to actually implement a full new season that would be more meaningful regarding what we are living right now, will be also more flexible and adaptable to also financially the unknown regarding are we going web, or are there going to be actual people in our audience or not, depending of the situation.
Right.
So there are plans right now after making a few scenarios, but now it's more about at the end of the summer then going along with, okay, so now we know we go with this and this, and let's present and let's launch, for example, those 2 first concerts, and make it branded that way. And then as we go blocks by blocks of concert, instead of launching a full season right away.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
that's our mindset right now. So then we can organize and also see the answer from our patrons and such regarding the price we put on our new platforms and such. And that way I feel the board of directors, but the musicians also, and the way we're increasing the amount of musicians and such, and hopefully the audience as well, we better are able to adapt accordingly. So that's more my mindset right now. And I was actually excited because sometimes I feel, okay, I'm preparing a season like 18 months ahead of time, writing down. But after that, there's some other ideas that comes up and you discover new works, and it changed so fast, I feel right now, that I actually felt it way better when I finally finished this and presented to the board for, again, knowing that we'd be taking decisions later on. But for me, like not producing anything or not presenting concert is really, really not an idea or a solution. And I'm super excited that both of my board's members were also having that mindset. So it was about making sure that we find the best solution possible for the sustainability of the orchestra, not just for the next few months,
Right.
but the next years to come, because this is not just a solution, small situation that will be corrected really quickly. And what is the normal can we expect, and all those such things. And also maintaining the belonging of our musicians. Like, I want them to practice. I want them to be excited about what is coming up. And also probably of what you mentioned, Scott, earlier, the way that there's no other orchestra or big competition in town in both of our cities. People are just super excited, and they are looking forward to what we've been hearing on the phone. They will be present as soon as it's possible to do so. That's the feeling we have from our community and patrons. So that's the mindset we have right now. But yeah, we need to do what it is. So.
Right, and you mentioned Beethoven. Our season finale was supposed to be Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, and of course, big Beethoven celebration year. We're still trying to do that. It's of course now planned for May 2021, and who knows where we will be at that point. There's all kinds of projections and models out there, but you can't really tell. And we're living an organic situation. How the future looks is how we act now, and I don't think the majority of the world quite understands that at the moment. So we just have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah.
Because right now we are trying. I've just like you planned a season. It was beautiful. It was exciting. That was months ago. It's gone through at least 25 transformations since then. Sure. And a lot of orchestras, funny enough, a lot had either already announced, or even, in the past few weeks, orchestras are announcing normal seasons. And, it's interesting, the different approaches that people are taking depending on what region they're in, because I feel like it's a risky thing to do. But if that's, if there's some sort of clause in the brochures, like, we hope to do this, but, be prepared for this, or to not have anything at all. But we're trying to start really small and actually, do something like highlighting music that has been born from pandemics, that sort of thing, and hopefully try to increase throughout the season. And of course, if we have to deviate, we're prepared to do so. But and we're even toying. Some of you mentioned subscribers. We're toying with at least for part of the season, maybe not even having a subscription and just waiting for the second half and just doing individual tickets and whatnot. But there's so many things in the air, and the downside is we do have to wait and see what happens in in individual communities, at the state level, at the national government level. I mean, I'm sure Canada is the same way, and it's
different from a province to another one. So that's why I'm surprised, but it was actually super nice to discuss with other music directors who just like decided to have a chat and to describe their own situation and what worked out. And I actually felt like that this situation brings some also great things. The amount of connection that I feel now regarding musicians all around the world, because we're all fighting with the same problems.
Yeah.
I found that really actually nice to be able to share our own solutions and such. And I felt music directors in Canada were quite generous regarding this. And that's thanks to all these ideas that I come up to this plan. But again, what is this going to be the best thing or best solution? Nobody knows. We're just hoping with what looks like it regarding restrictions.
Exactly. And Dane, how much does in China, how much does local response differ from sort of a statewide response? Like, is there any sort of disagreement there? Or is it like, oh, our community is different from there, it should be done a different way, or how is that generally over there?
It is a pretty top-down sort of way of doing things. I mean, a lot of directives and recommendations come from the central government, but then each province and each some of these super cities like Shanghai, which almost functions as a province all by itself, in Beijing, they had different ways of dealing with the virus, but the restrictions on numbers of people in public gatherings in theaters seems to be pretty uniform across the board in China. And it's not just in China that's, I mean, I'm sure it's difficult for you guys in North America. I know it's difficult in Australia. I know here in the UK, there was this big survey that went out to audience members asking how they would deal with this. Would they return with social distancing? Would they return, if they had to wear masks? Would they return only in the event there was a vaccine? And the responses were not really what we wanted to hear about getting back and doing things.
Interesting.
Because we have to remember as well that actually this doesn't apply to China, but in the UK and Australia, in North America, the majority of our audience is in the so-called risk group for coronavirus. And that's a difficult thing we have to grapple with. And actually, that's something really interesting about my time in China. I have never done so many concerts with so many children, high school students, university students. The majority of the audience is under 40.
Wow.
Yeah, because it's so new. They're not the same sort of preconceptions about classical music there, and it services a sort of different demographic, I suppose.
And I'm curious, for example, you mentioned that sometimes regarding programming, it's different, and I heard that also from other people. So what are the composers that they really enjoy, or what are the most different things?
They love Mozart, Chopin, Dvorak, Tchaikovsky. These concerts can always sell. It's really funny looking at figures sometimes, and if I want to do something by Berio or whatever, you can put something by Tchaikovsky on the first half. Yeah, I mean it's a similar principle everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
But in things that especially when I first started there was a program with the symphonic dancers from West Side Story, and I can't remember what else was in that program. But in America and Australia and the UK, you put West Side Story in a program, it's going to sell.
Yeah. Okay. Not there. Okay. That's all.
And Mahler has been a journey. We've been doing one Mahler symphony each year in sort of collaboration with the University of Queensland, which is it's where I did my bachelor's degree in Australia. And so they send over some students and faculty, and we combine and we make a Mahler-sized orchestra. But that has taken time. I think we've done 4 Mahler symphonies over 4 years now, and that's taken time to get a following. But there are now Mahlerians in Xi'an.
Good.
I was just reading some comments and see if you have any questions. Brian, he is in Great Britain currently. I'm sure you caught that. So at this point, moving forward, because you know we're talking about these things and how we have to be aware of restrictions and things we're allowed and not allowed to do. But I think there's one layer more than for organizations like North State, and I'm sure other smaller organizations or regional orchestras. Our audiences are older, and even on this pre-new normal realm, I'm sure, and I know that a lot of our audience, for example, doesn't have access to our online content. And similarly, because one of our big missions as an organization is increasing our educational offerings and making sure we have robust outreach programs out there. And, even from a student perspective, there is a lot of just a lack of accessibility to technology. So these are all things that we have to consider as we move forward and, incorporate things we're doing now, the things that will stick into an actual physical season. So these are all challenges that I know I'm trying to think through, and I'm sure you guys are doing the same. But some people don't even have access to the internet, and and then top that with the fact that as we're talking about with these surveys and things, because we're of course doing the same thing, and currently waiting for the results of one of our first big ones that we pushed out there. But even from my standpoint, I wouldn't want to go to a concert, and I'm not in the most, at-risk category until I feel like there is a special awareness to making someone feel safe, that the appropriate precautions are in place, social distancing, that the musicians are not too many to overwhelm you at once. There's all these things that you have to think about. And it's almost like we've torn everything down and we have to start over from scratch and slowly introduce the wheel. And it's a crazy journey, and it's going to be, I think, an even crazier rebuilding process. Especially, I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but even doing online streaming to those who can access it. I think I heard about this yesterday. I think it was the New Bedford Symphony tried to do online streaming, an online performance of Bach, and it was taken down for copyright.
That's awful, though. I saw about this, and it's already been a few years. I think they are struggling with these kind of
these bots.
There's always people trying to get money on things, and this is really bad that we are. Like, who can say that they own Bach? I'm like, this is terrible. Yeah,
it's absurd. I mean, we even had a watch party last week with Beethoven's 7th Symphony that we recorded, and because we had posted it just a few days before it was supposed to be watched, all these like copyright restrictions started to fall into place, and like even during our watch party, there were random muted sections of the recording that were only resolved today.
It's ridiculous. And the problem is that we live in a world of pop music, and of course, there's a lot of unauthorized performances of songs that are still in copyright on YouTube and Facebook and whatever. And so these algorithms and these bots haven't been designed with the very small section of the market that classical music makes up, because essentially everything we do is a cover. We're like the Rolls Royce of covers bands, really, everything we do. And so there's not even a human involved in that first step on YouTube. But it happens all the time when someone will say, "Oh, that's Karajan's performance of Beethoven." Well, it's very flattering, but that ain't Karajan. And normally, as soon as you file a dispute, and I have to say the dispute system on YouTube is much more robust than on Facebook, and it is resolved generally faster. Okay. As soon as a human gets involved, generally they'll just release the copyright claim. But it's this automation. It's this automation that makes it so difficult. And it's these whole programs, these bots are not designed with classical music in mind.
Well, it's certainly one of the biggest challenges that I know a lot of speaking for a lot of my friends who I know rely solely on random gig to gig to gig and are trying to do these online events and performances to, at the very least, keep their names out there. And if they keep getting shut down, I mean, there's no winning in any of this. It's certainly been a reinforcing discussion, at least for me, and I hope that those who are joining us live and who will watch this in the coming days and weeks are brought to an awareness that this is not, just the North State Symphony or the Kamloops Symphony. This is a universal crisis that all performing arts organizations are trying to figure out together. And that's, again, as Dina and Dane said, this is one of the greatest things about our current situation, is that we do have the opportunity to have this enormous exchange of ideas and this commonality of, we're all in this together, and we can find a solution together and hopefully resolve each other's problems together, especially before they become so robust that they become uncontrollable. But do you guys have anything to add in sort of this COVID looking forward discussion?
Well, I think that something that has become eminently clear through all these online performances and remote performances and everything is that there is really no substitute for live performance. And so we're all looking forward to that day when we can get back, and we're game planning all kinds of eventualities. But the only eventuality that will be acceptable to us and to our audiences is that we have live performances again, and we just have to work out how.
I agree 100%. And, as soon as this all started, at least I noticed in North America and some other places, you started to see these virtual orchestras and virtual other choruses and ensembles. And I don't think people realize, at least I don't think our general audiences realize, that you can't do live virtual performances. The technology basically is not there to do so. And that these 3 and 4 minute clips you see of various ensembles is actually them, sending in these excerpts and, of course, editing by themselves, because of course we deal with perfectionist musicians. But then it's a video editor and an audio editor sitting there for 50 to 100 hours putting together this 2 to 3 minute clip. And, that's just not a good way to think about the future. I agree 100% that we have to get back safely into the concert hall as soon as we possibly can, because my sanity depends on it.
Yeah, mine too. And also the audience actually is part of the performance itself. Like we all, on the stage, musicians, when we know that we are sharing this present moment with an audience, that's changed the content of how we perceive the piece and everything. So they are so important. So the patrons, the audience, essential to our craft, to our art. So yeah, I'm really looking forward. So yes, finding ways in between before we get back, but yeah.
Exactly. We have a fun question that someone posed. What instruments do we all play? And I think those who know me know that I'm primarily a saxophonist, but Dina,
so I play piano and then clarinet. Yeah, I'm
exactly the same.
Yeah, you do. And I could get back to practice a little bit more. I mean, since this pandemic, obviously, and usually I have no time, obviously, just for fun. But I needed to be closer to music.
Yeah, that's actually I've gotten back to the piano again, to Bach and Beethoven and Mozart, where so I maybe haven't studied scores, but yeah, I've played more.
Well, I'm trying to set aside some time to incorporate score study into my day, even though there's so much other stuff to think about and deal with. And I'm actually myself, and you guys are talking about practicing. I'm trying to get back into it myself and actually do like an online duet or trio with some colleagues, which I think are fun to do. But again, certainly no substitute for anything live in a concert hall with an audience, with this energy that goes between the musicians and those that are listening. And there's really nothing like it, and I can't wait to go back. Well, I just wanted to thank you both for spending the last almost hour with us, and it's been a lively exchange of ideas, and we're all in this together, and I'm sure that we have a long way to go. And anyone who has questions for us, even after the live portion, feel free to send them, and I'm sure my two colleagues will be happy to send any responses your way. So again, thank you to our online audience, and thank you again, Dina and Dane, and I hope we can get into the concert hall very soon.
Let's hope. Let's hope. Thanks,
Okay.
Thanks so much.
No, thank you both. And Dina, enjoy Montreal. Dane, enjoy London. And I hope to chat with you both again very soon.
Yes.
Great. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.